Hi, and welcome to the Introduction to Outcome Evaluation training. This is a training that was originally put on by the Ruth Mott Foundation for the grantees. It was hosted in August of 2016. During the presentation, there were activities which I will describe as we go through. However, since we are not interacting, I will not obviously have you do the presentations or the activities. I also wanted to note that I broke up this training into 4 different recordings, and the reason for that is simply the size and the amount of time it would take to sit and watch all of them. So you will see that there are 4 recordings, and they are all from the same trainings. So the purpose of these trainings is really to add common language to the work that we are doing with grantees around outcome evaluation. We are also looking to help our grantees and organizations in North Flint to develop outcomes or refine outcomes for their organizations. We would also encourage grantees to consider different methodologies for gathering data for those outcomes. And if you're an organization that's really happy with the way that you are gathering data, maybe you'll find another way that seems more feasible for your organization, or maybe you'll decide to stick with what you have. But if you have not been happy with identifying and measuring your outcomes currently and the methodologies that you've chosen, then this may be an opportunity for you to see some other ways to go about that. We are also very interested in you as organizations of North Flint beginning to collaborate around data, maybe sharing data as organizations as you can, or accessing either publicly available or other secondary data sources. As a foundation, as most of you know, we have a focus on North Flint and specifically the strategies that were identified by residents in North Flint that would make a difference for those residents. And we as a foundation are very interested in knowing that the work that we're doing is making the difference that the residents would like to see. And so we are hoping that the work that we're doing with you all in this training will be reflected in both our December proposals as well as the grants that are currently in progress that started in June. So we're hoping that your proposals are having a list of outcomes that you plan to measure with brief methodologies, and that your reports will also reflect that information as well. I think the last thing I'd like to say before we get started is that evaluation can be done in your organizations and does not need to be overly complicated. And it's important to note that, because generally when people think of evaluation, they are really thinking more about research, a research double-blind study that's done at a university, and that's not necessarily what we're looking for. Although there are times and places for that, our view of evaluation is really that it must be useful to the organization and provide necessary information. So the agenda for today, and again, this is broken up into 4 different sections. So the first section, we're going to talk very briefly about proposals and reports. The second section will go into evaluation questions, outputs, and outcomes. The third section will talk more in detail about data collection and techniques and methodologies. And then the last section will include evaluation consent, data security and sharing, and the next steps and homework that I assigned to the group. And it is important to note that this training is the first of 2 planned trainings so far. So this training is for all of our grantees together, and then our next set of trainings will actually be workshops in September, and those workshops will be broken up by our 4 priority areas, and we will work more closely together on identifying outcomes within those priorities, as well as potential measurements for those outcomes, including connecting with community partners who have access to a wide variety of data. All right, so let's get. My first question to the group is, why is the collection and use of data important? A lot of organizations really, and this is actually a question I put out to the group, but I'm going to go ahead and answer it since, again, we don't have an interactive way right now. So a lot of organizations really see the collection and use of data as important in reporting out to funders and other people who are interested to know how they're doing, maybe making their annual report and things like that. But the collection and use of data is even more important than that, because it's really adding that layer of learning for your organization. And so, maybe you have a particular group of individuals that is not as likely to come to your organization as others. Maybe there's something within your organization that's keeping those individuals from coming in. And if you're not asking questions about what makes your service good for certain individuals and not as good for other individuals, then you're never going to be able to, make the changes that are necessary to keep those individuals coming to your organization, and maybe even grow that population as well. So one thing that I said that's really important is that we as a foundation expect to see you identify outcomes and potential methodologies in both the proposals and the reports. And this slide is really, I'm hoping to show you that there should be an overlap between what you're proposing to do and what you're reporting on. And it should be a pretty clear overlap between those two. So your proposals should have a project description, and that should describe exactly what you want to do with the grant money that you're requesting. It may also include an organizational description, and probably should include an organizational description. That also is going to be put into your report as well. The second thing that is included is answering the question, how does the project address the identified North Flint priorities? And so really clearly saying how the project or organization is addressing youth, neighborhoods, economic opportunities, and safety in North Flint specifically. When you write your report, the report should reflect on how the project did identify the North Flint priorities. And in order to do both of those things, there needs to be a list of outcomes that are specifically tied to youth, neighborhoods, economic opportunities, and safety, and specifically the strategies that we've highlighted in both of, actually as the neighbors, the community has identified in all 4 of those areas. And in your proposal, we should see evidence of prior results from the organization and the program. In the report, we should see, a reflection on how that actually panned out. The third thing we'd like to see is how does the proposal demonstrate organizational and program effectiveness? And so again, showing those results that you have been effective in the work that you're doing, and if you're not speaking specific, maybe you have a brand new project you'd like to start, you should be able to speak to your organizational effectiveness. But if you're starting a brand new program, you should be able to speak to the effectiveness of the program as far as maybe a literature review and what has worked in the past. In your report, then, you're going to report on how did the organization or program demonstrate effectiveness. So again, reporting out on what actually happened. And the last area is how does the project align with Ruth Mott Foundation's approach to community engagement? It should be very clear to us how you're engaging with the community, and really a higher level of engagement is more favorable. So asking participants, what they really need, and then including participants in the evaluation of the project and things like that. Your proposal will talk about how you will track that, and then your report is going to talk about how you actually did track that and what were the results of that work. This is the end of part 1. Please continue to part 2.